Я наступного спікера зараз представлю. Це Doug Madory. There is a Doug Madory from Kentik. It's an internet analysis company. So, Doug, you should have this Zoom access. Додайте, будь ласка, його до co-host, щоб він міг показувати презентацію. Like, we'll give you the permission for a speaker presenter.
Okay.
Doug is from United States. Doug, can you maybe say where you're located in? I know you're in East Coast, but it doesn't have to be exact city, right? Just so we may know.
So thank you for inviting me to this presentation. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, you may speak up a little bit. We hear you. You may be going just a little higher if you can.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me. Congratulations on the 30th anniversary of the UACTLD. I wish it was under better circumstances, and I hope to, in the future, maybe come and attend this event in person when we have peace. So, my background. So I am a computer scientist. I do analysis of internet routing. And I worked at companies called Renesas and then Dyn DNS, Oracle, and now I'm at a company called Kentik that does mostly net flow analysis for network service providers. But what I do is I look at our data, our aggregate net flow data, and then I do a lot of BGP analysis and try to understand how are things happening on the internet. And this year, a focus of mine has been documenting some of the events in Ukraine to try to help tell the story from a technical standpoint, the impacts that the conflict has had on connectivity in Ukraine. So that's a little background of me, and I will share my screen here. So after this. This conflict kicked off in February. I got in touch with Dmitry, as did a number of Western tech companies, to try to figure out how we could assist. This year, I've been personally watching the BGP routes of Hostmaster to make sure there were no routing hijacks or leaks. We did identify a leak at the beginning that was an accidental thing that we worked together to resolve, but I still to this day watch the routing to make sure nothing happens to the CCTLD of Ukraine. So this is a presentation. I'm going to do just a quick version of a presentation I gave at NANOG last month in Hollywood, California, rolling up the observations of mine as well as other people in the internet measurement space on the impacts of the war in Ukraine. Kind of a couple of sections here. There was a lot of analysis done on the initial months. And then I'll talk about this switchover in Kherson that we did analysis on in the summer, and then this most recent, Ukrainian counteroffensive. And then there's been even more. This is an ongoing thing. There's been more things that have happened since this presentation was put together. But for me, I was at NANOG 84, which is our big internet operator conference in the U.S. in Austin, Texas in February, and the Russian army had come to the border of Ukraine. There was debate over what was going to happen, and we started seeing DDoS attacks. And then I was getting inquiries from the media, so I speak to the U.S. media a lot. I get quoted in the press, and about confirming DDoS attacks that were being reported. We could see this in our data. This is stuff that we were putting out into the public or publishing. Things getting targeted in Ukraine. Over the course of a week, these shifted from banks to government entities that we were seeing getting hit, and they weren't record-breaking in size, but they did have impact, especially for networks that didn't have much in the way of DDoS mitigation. And then on February 24, the Russian army came into Ukraine. On that day, there was a cyber attack against a European satellite operator. Was visible in, this is a screenshot from IOTA. This is actually a public internet measurement tool that anyone can go and look at any given time. You can go and recreate this view on your own if you wish to. In this particular case, it was a security company had figured out that there was a destructive malware introduced to the ground terminals of the satellite operator. When they updated with the latest update, they essentially self-destructed, and this did cause connectivity problems in Ukraine, but all across Europe. This is a big network. We also observed outages in, so this is Triolon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is national broadband operator. So if I talk about these graphs here, there's a couple different lines going across. There's the green is the BGP routes of the network through time. Sometimes they stay up and there's still an outage, but if it drops, there's usually some problem. The blue line is we call active probing or active measurement, and this is pinging things, doing ping scans of responding hosts in the network, and when that drops, that's usually a good sign of a problem. The orange is what they call telescope. It's just background traffic coming from devices, so that's can be used as a proxy for user activity. Cloudflare has a similar public tool, and they saw this March 9th outage due to a cyber attack as well. Ukraine Telecom, also we reported on a number of outages there. Yeah, we could see these are graphics from my company as well as one from IOTA. And let's see, yeah, there were outages due to fiber optic cables getting cut, outages due to cyber attacks. This was a case for this one was confirmed to be the result of a cyber attack due to somebody being taken into custody by Russian forces from Ukraine Telecom. So those are all effects on the edge of the devices or the extremities of the internet. There's also changes happening within how do the providers of Ukraine connect to the outside world, and so we saw also this changes in that space. So the transit market, what are the transit relationships of Ukraine? And so this is an example of Vodafone Ukraine losing its adjacency in BGP, or its transit from MTS. That's coincided with the larger Vodafone ending its partnership with MTS over the conflict. So it had an effect in routing. And then there were also outages that you typically fell into one of two categories. One was on the left, where you see Russian transit going away, either due to, and I don't always know the story here, if this is a line that's been destroyed, or someone chose to take it down, or they decided to, that part I can't see from the data, or there's examples like we have on the right, where we're seeing an intense amount of routing instability as the network stays online due to outages, infrastructure attacks. And there was also a lot of blowback in Russia. So your Minister of Digital Transformation called for this IT army. It's kind of a unique thing, asking people if they want to help Ukraine to attack things in Russia, listing out these websites. And so we started seeing, even before his that call, we started seeing retaliatory attacks of people who are sympathetic to the Ukraine, attacking symbolic targets like Kremlin.ru in Russia. I mean, we saw also attacks on the CCTLD network of Ukraine and Russia. I sent those on to Dmitry. He asked that I not publish them. We didn't. There's one issue with publishing this, is that we don't want to reward people for notoriety for these attacks, or make them think that they're being successful, because some of this is just to get attention. So there's a lot more attacks, and we just haven't. We're trying to be responsible on what we put out into the public sphere, and I'll just pass that privately on to Dmitry and his team. So as Russia started becoming a target of DDoS attacks, we did see changes in Russian internet. There was a Russian e-government self-service platform that normally it gets transit from Rostelecom. Rostelecom sends these routes out to its international links, and it was a target on that list, and then it pulled its routes where the route was still in circulation within Russia, but you couldn't reach it from outside. That was one way to fend off DDoS attacks. And then sites like mil.ru also took steps to block traffic from the outside world. It was a Ukrainian request that Russia be disconnected shut down the DNS root servers in Russia, revoke this Russian TLDs, and withdraw the right to use v4, v6 addresses. This was refused in the end. This probably wasn't likely to actually, I mean, even if it were approved, it'd be very hard to practically do some of this. But it did lead to this effort of this idea of, like, could you come up with a more targeted version of internet sanctions to try to not have to limit collateral damage on civilian access to information, but then target government or military assets online. Let's see. So Russia began blocking a lot of independent media and independent news. There was UNI, which is the Internet Observatory of Network Interference. This is a group associated with the Tor group, and so they study and publish about internet blockage. They've published quite a number of things this year about the technical mechanisms used by Russia to block independent news and social media within Russia. There was this centralized throttling of Twitter, which led to a inadvertent BGP hijack of Twitter. On March 28th, there was a Russian telecom that leaked out a route. They were intended to hijack traffic to Russia using BGP just internally, but the route leaked out. And it was the same prefix, the same thing had happened the year prior during the military coup in Myanmar. However, the difference between what happened in Myanmar last year and this year was that Twitter had published RPKI ROAs. So this is a routing security mechanism that they adopted in the intervening year. This enables other providers to then block hijack routes like this, and so this didn't actually get circulated very far. So I see it as a success for the RPKI service. There was a kind of strange story with Cogent and Lumen. These are global backbone U.S. companies that had both made announcements within a couple of days that they would be ceasing operations in Russia. In the end, there were a few customers that were cut off, but this really hasn't had much of an effect, and they continue to operate. They still serve Russian ISPs. So this was, it was kind of a strange story and how it didn't really pan out. So then this summer, as you all know, the war shifted towards the east and the south, as opposed to the center of the country, and these areas in the east, they have been using mostly Russian transit, even prior to the Euromaidan, but that's become more distinct. The separation, there's a partition of the internet that's increased over the years, and more so this year. And so we'll see, like, if you were to run, like with the Right Atlas Pro, or run a trace route from Donetsk to Kiev, you may be taken up to Moscow, to St. Petersburg, Stockholm, Frankfurt, and then back to Kiev. It may be 100 milliseconds or more round trip, which is what you might expect to see across the Pacific Ocean. So there are things in Ukraine that are right next to each other on a map, but as far as the internet goes, they are a Pacific Ocean apart. That's the distance. The other story that we were a part of this summer was analyzing the switchover of internet transit in Kherson in the south of Ukraine. So I worked with the New York Times on this piece that they published in August. It made the front page of the newspaper. This graphic on the left was their graphic where they were using these dots are actually supposed to be ASs, but they didn't want to describe BGP because it would be too much to try to explain. I wrote a blog post myself and put it and made a little animation of this BGP reconfiguration that I found pretty interesting. This is actually since now reverted, and so I need to make another graphic showing how this has gone back. But right now, Kherson is either on or off. Like a lot of parts of Ukraine, it suffers outages daily, but the transit through Crimea has mostly gone away. And then, yeah, there was this attack against the Kerch bridge just recently. There was a small amount of internet impact that we saw. Mostly this didn't have much effect on the Russian service in Crimea, but then there was these missile attacks across the country, and we were seeing drops in traffic as different electrical plants were targeted and taken offline. And so we, but I think there's it's a bit of a good news story. The internet of Ukraine has been really resilient, and these are a number of different metrics that people have used to look at whether ours is up on the top right. We have the IOTA thing I mentioned, Cloudflare, Google is on the bottom right. These are all measures of traffic through time in the first 30 days of the conflict when it was at its worst, and it was all registered drops by various metrics, but the internet stayed online. And this was super important because this was enabled, the government of Ukraine to rally global support to tell their story and get people to come to their aid. There were news organizations covering the war using just the mobile service, the local internet service that was critical that it was still online, and then for the average Ukrainian to show the world what was happening, to contact loved ones. This was really important, and there was this is all due to heroic efforts of the Ukrainian technicians. There's been a lot written about this, but it's super impressive for folks. This is I'm in the internet industry, and I look at these people as these are people in my industry, and it makes me very proud. And these people are heroes and patriots to their country. So, what does this war mean in the internet age? This is the first large-scale war taking place with a highly connected country. We see DDoS attacks, ISP outages, both to physical attacks as well as cyber attacks, and then heroic efforts by the Ukrainian technicians. There is this effort of you keep Ukraine connected. Maybe you've heard of this, of organizations trying to source replacement fiber optic gear and telecommunications gear and actually drive it into Ukraine to deliver to make sure these technicians have got all the equipment that they need to make their repairs. I've been supportive of this project, and I'm in touch with Renee, who's one of the leaders of it. There's been a lot of blowback in Russia. We can measure that due with the censorship that's taking place there, and this discussion of internet-level sanctions. And yeah, I think that's it's just the keep Ukraine connected. So I gave this, like I said, I gave this talk in at NANOG last month, and made a plug for this project. So thanks again for having me, and please let me know if there's if you have any questions. If you have any, if there's anything you'd like me, I've got a lot of data, I've got a lot of tools. If there's ever any way I can assist any of you, please let me know. Dimitri can share my contact information. Happy to help, and I think that's it.
Thank you, Doug. I'll be happy to follow up with you, and we have to update our program. Svetlana, please don't forget that. I know you're very busy because we have to add your name and presentation. Maybe email me the final slides, and
Yes.
we'll publish them now because that's possible, right? We can publish them on our site immediately, and
That's fine.
then later we can add the video recording. I guess we have your consent. I mean, it's just the recording of this. Будь ласка, якісь питання, якщо у вас є. Я бачу, Зубок написав, що він хоче повернутися до цього чату на якийсь чат для цієї презентації.